you can maybe start by introducing yourself, and then people will start filtering in.
Sure. So first of all, thanks everyone for joining me on Monday afternoon. Hopefully folks have had some chance to get a bite to eat or something like that. Well, depending on what part of the world that you're in, obviously, because if you're in San Fran, then that's probably a little bit early. Nigeria, I'm not sure what time it is there. It's probably evening. But thanks for joining me. For those that don't know who I am, Luki Danukarjanto. Luki is fine. I'm originally from Indonesia, which is where the last name comes from. But as you can tell, ancestrally I'm Chinese, so I'm actually part of the the Chan lineage. But due to some civil unrest in the country, my dad had to change his last name, and he got a little bit creative. And if any of you are ever in Indonesia and need a resourceful worker, you can ask for a Danu Karyanto, and they'll get you one. So another fun fact is my uncle, who is my dad's blood brother, actually has a different last name because he picked a different last name. So I was born in Indonesia, moved to Canada, moved to Toronto when I was young, and basically grew up in the area. Ended up doing a degree in computer science. My dad worked at IBM. Silicon Valley was growing at the time. I'm a little older than most folks here. And teenage boy wanting to get into computer games. It seems like it made perfect sense. Unfortunately, I graduated when the dot-com bubble burst. So that's circa 2002. All the tech companies were devastated, just like in 2008, 2009, when the financial sector was devastated, and kind of now when like hospitality and travel is devastated. It was really hard for folks in tech to get a job at the time. But luckily, I had a friend whose brother was looking for a developer. So he helped me get an interview and I got the job. As even more luck would have it, I ended up working for Deloitte. So Deloitte is one of the big four accounting firms, but I was on their consulting side. And I basically moved from the technical side of consulting, starting as a coder, then becoming a technical lead, business analysis, testing, change management, training, project management, advisory. And I spent over 12 years there. So by the time I decided to leave about 5 years ago, I was a senior manager. Next step would have been partner. That's kind of C-level executive for those that know consulting. So I did a bunch of stuff from a sourcing and procurement perspective with supply chain stuff, if anybody's interested in any of that. But why a lot of folks usually want to speak to me is I used to also run their undergrad campus recruiting program. So from 2006 to 2015, when I left, I literally had the list that said yes or no for anyone that got hired across all the universities across Canada, right? So resumes, interviews, networking, it comes from that experience, right? Yeah, now I've started my own business. I am a career coach, and I basically work with pretty much every post-secondary institute across Toronto. So most of the colleges, universities. I do some sort of workshops or some sort of mentoring or advising or something with them. A lot of companies, startups, and helping them with a lot of new hire, new manager, new programs, alumni mentoring type programs, and a bunch of non-for-profits too. I also have obviously one-on-one clients that I deal with too, and otherwise create a bunch of content. So I wrote a book. It's called Stuff I Wish I Knew Earlier. Which kind of sums me up. I wish that a lot of the stuff that I share in workshops that they were teaching in school, things like emotional intelligence, effective communication, time management, learning to learn. Why don't they teach you how to do that in school? And yeah, so I'm host of a podcast of the same name, and I'm working on a new app, which is a Career Buddy, considered a career coach in your pocket, kind of having like Luki in your pocket, right? Someone that'll tell you and guide you along your career, your job, and your life, hopefully, and do that. So that's a few things that are there, but it's a far cry from me starting off as that shy, introverted computer scientist. Because when people see me now and then see me when I was younger, they're like, "What happened? You were that kid who was kind of in the corner, always kept to himself, was more focused on code than anything." But now I'm out in front of people doing workshops and things like that, and sharing kind of thoughts and insights. So part of what I do is share some of those insights. And share kind of that stuff I wish I knew earlier. I call it SWIKE, stuff I wish I knew earlier, obviously the acronym for it. It's been trademarked and everything, so don't worry too much about that. but I look to make an impact on the world, right? So Monarch, Navi, and Jennifer have graciously allowed me to be part of this community, to kind of share some insights and wisdoms, helping fellow tech folks get into the business world and hopefully learning a few things along the way. So that's me in a nutshell. Happy to answer more questions along that. But I would love to get to know you a little bit more. So if folks are able to, there's quite a few folks here. Usually I get folks to unmute themselves, but because there's about, I don't know, 16, 18 of you, probably best to do it in the chat, or else we might be here for a while. So if you want to put in like kind of your name, what you're doing right now. So if you're working or looking for a job, you're a student or whatever else, and maybe a fun fact, something interesting that a few people know about you. So the fun facts I usually share is I love spicy food, but not like the vinegary spice, like the chicken wing vinegary spice. I don't really like that, or like the Szechuan like numbing spice. I like kind of like the garlicky, flavorful spice, right? So those are the types of things I do. I used to love traveling when we were allowed to do that. Well, I still like traveling, but obviously we're not allowed to do that. Went to like Thailand and took an elephant up a mountain, right? So those are a few things. Have two kids, if anybody's in that boat. Two boys, they're youngins, and yeah, anything else that you'd want to share. But what I'd love to do is nominate this. So if you want to populate the chat with kind of those three things, your name, what you're doing now, and a fun fact about you, that would make things awesome. But a few simple ground rules. I just want to nominate this as basically a safe space, right? So we're here to learn and grow. We're going to do interviews. We're going to practice them. We're going to learn a whole bunch of things. And some of you might not be too comfortable in that, right? So what I want to do is nominate this as a safe space where people can get comfortable, people can learn, people can grow, and people will help each other out. So I think that's part of the premise around the whole community. And doing things like that, right? So be open. So I might challenge you to do a few things. If something doesn't make sense, please ask, right? And be helpful. And if you want to continue the conversations with other folks afterwards and help each other in mock interviewing on the side, you're feel free to do so. I assume that's okay. But otherwise, take action, right? Because really, what I'm looking for is interviewing is something that a lot of folks they don't really understand, right? They assume that it's something that outlines whether or not they're good at the role, but unfortunately, it's not necessarily the case. So we have some names trickling in. Oh, Maga from my class, so I guess it's good that she's there. Mohammed. I can't eat onions. Not allergic, but my body part rejects it. Oh, interesting. So I'm one of the weird people that I love onion rings, but I hate like raw onions, right? So I need my onions cooked. So I kind of share that. Oh, sorry, that was Jennifer. Not it was a hello Mohammed for that. David is working on a small educational app. He was once on a big TV show in China. Interesting. So if anybody knows J. David, they have to find the clip of him. Sana is from General Assembly, learning to code, love Friends, obviously with her background. Yeah, so she learned English with it. Elena, former PM, transitioning. Fun fact, avocados are our favorite fruit, and I try to have it with my diet every day. Wow, okay. Maxine, nice. So she's has a week off right now. Okay. Gone to small city in Japan to study the traditional ways of making koji. Ooh, okay. Interesting. I don't know, but I guess it's an ingredient soy sauce. So thanks everyone for sharing. And for those that aren't, I really encourage you to get comfortable being uncomfortable and sharing a little bit more, because when you're able to share, especially in a safe environment, then you learn and grow a little bit more. So is my screen still sharing? Just to make sure, yeah, because usually there's like a green line, but I guess Zoom removed the outline. But one of the things why I encourage folks to practice interviewing is that it's a skill. It's actually separate from the job interview. And what people don't understand is that being good at an interview doesn't actually make you good at being good at the job, right? So being a good developer, front end, back end, technical architect, business analyst, or whatever it is, the fact that you can interview for the role doesn't necessarily mean that you're good at the job, and vice versa. Just because you're bad at interviewing doesn't mean you can't be the greatest, whatever it is anyway, right? Keep in mind that interviewing is a skill and it can be improved. So a lot of people make the mistake of just winging it, right? They go to an interview and just, okay, I'm just going to answer it the best that I can. That's probably one of the biggest mistakes that people can make, right? Oftentimes it is practice. There are certain ways, certain methods that you're supposed to go through an interview. There are frameworks like the SHARE or the STAR or the CAR framework that you could use to answer certain type of questions. And if you're not familiar with them, well, then you're further behind in that. And then other people who can do the job and have also practiced interviewing can benefit from that. I encourage folks to research and have questions for the interviewer, right? So it demonstrates interest in that, right? So those are basic things where you want to practice, right? And what we'll cover are some of the fundamentals of what you want to practice in an interview. And improve. Take the time. One interview question every day if you can, right? One of the recommendations I often have is to go to Google, print out the, or whatever search engine you prefer, print out the top 100 interview questions and cut them up, right? Put them in a little bowl. And then every day, grab your smartphone and tell me about yourself. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? What are your weaknesses? Whatever. And what you want to do is pick one thing to improve each time. And the things that you want to improve are things like eye contact, right? So you want to be looking at the interviewer's eyes, which is the camera there, or you could be looking at the screen, your own eyes, because sometimes it's hard to be looking at the camera, but the interviewer's eyes aren't over there, right? So for the people who have a tendency to look elsewhere when they're doing it, there's no camera there, right? So they know when you're not looking at the camera that you're a little bit more nervous. You're not as confident, right? You don't have to be 100% there, but at least kind of 70% is a good number. So eye contact, smiling, right, is an important one, especially in this new kind of video environment where you can actually see yourself. Practice smiling, because if you think about it, if you were to hire a candidate and you had this candidate, right, he was all energetic and he was all interested in the role, versus this guy, he says the answers that are technically correct and has a lot of rationality to everything that he does. But would you rather hire this guy or would you rather hire this guy, right? I'd probably rather hire this person. Again, if their skills were identical and pretty much the same, I'd rather hire the person who's smiling than not. So practice. And oftentimes, again, being a former computer scientist, we're not necessarily the most kind of bubbly personalities, but you can learn to be so. I used to have, or I still do, I used to have, I have a RBF. Does anybody know what RBF is? Right? It's a resting bitch face, where basically, if I'm sitting there, it looks like I'm angry. It looks like I'm upset. And then people have actually come up to me and say, Luki, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, what do you mean? It's like, yeah, you look like you're angry or upset. No, that's just how my face is, unfortunately. So I actually have to make a conscious effort to smile, right? And be a little bit more upbeat. So I encourage folks to practice, because when you often think you're smiling, you're not smiling, right? People tend to like those that are more fun, more energetic. And part of it is also the cultural fit, where people want you to join the team, not because you can technically do the work, but also because you'd be a great fit for the culture and the environment, right? And usually having a little bit of a smile, a little bit more of a personality will help, right? Another thing that seems like common sense, but did you actually answer the question, right? And one thing that I recommend folks to do is when they record yourself, watch yourself the next day, right? Because there's a difference between what you thought and what you said. And what most people do is they watch it, it's like, yeah, that made perfect sense. That's great. But then when you watch it the next day, it's like, oh man, this doesn't make sense at all. Like I thought I said it, but I didn't actually say it. So when you watch it the next day, or at least in the afternoon, you get to listen it to the merits of the actual answer itself, not for what you thought you said during the time, right? What you want to make sure is you make it relevant for the company and the role, because every question that's asked is actually a 3-part question, right? The first part of the question is whatever the question was. The second part of the question is, and how does that benefit the company and the role? And the third part is, and why should I hire you, right? So the most common question that they'll ask you is, tell me about yourself. Well, I like long walks on the beach. I like eating avocados. I like eating spicy food, whatever. No. you want to make it relevant to the company and the role. So you need to talk about your expertise in front-end development, back-end, or the different languages that you have, or any tight deadlines that you've met, those types of things. And you want to make it so that with that answer, that is the reason why you should hire me, right? Because you can't guarantee that they'll ask you more and more questions than that, right? Which some people automatically assume that, oh, I thought you'd ask me that question later. Well, they might not. So you want to make sure that the question stands on its own, and hopefully is compelling enough and interesting enough that they call you back, right? Could you say more or be more concise, right? Some people are shy and introverted, so they actually say the minimum amount, right? I was like that where my answers were quite short. I didn't want to elaborate more. But I realized that by doing that, it's doing me a disservice, because if your answers are kind of less than a minute, right, it sounds like you don't have enough to say. You don't have enough accomplishments. You're not as relevant for the role, right? If your answers are more than 3 minutes, then it better be a damn good answer, right? You better make it compelling, make it interesting for people to want to hear whatever you're saying, right? So if you're the opposite side, where you're very verbose and you keep going and you talk, then you want to say, okay, could I have said it quicker, more clearly, more concisely, right? Avoid filler words. If you have the tendency to or somewhat, yeah, like, add any of those to your vocabulary, then see if you can actually take them out, right? And instead of saying the word, just pause, right? Send a little pause instead of saying your like, instead of saying your instead of saying your instead of your. Those words are quite distracting, actually, if you pay attention to them. If someone overly uses it, now getting rid of them is quite difficult. So you might use that as kind of one of the last elements that you work on, but it's something to work on, because you don't actually know until you notice that you say right all the time, that you say like all the time, like you say so all the time. So depending on what word is yours, then you want to make sure that you start removing them. And thinking about creating a natural end, right? So the easiest way to do it is basically summarize the question. So if it's tell me about yourself, and that's a little bit about me, about leadership skills, and that's how I demonstrated leadership skills. What weaknesses, and that's an example of one of my weaknesses that I'm looking to improve on, right? So naturally end it versus stopping talking. Because sometimes when you stop talking, I don't know if it's like the internet connection got down, or if something happened, you're thinking about it, or what have you, right? When you have that natural end, it makes it easy for the interviewer to keep going. So those are some of the things that I encourage everyone to start thinking about when we practice and go through. Then we'll work on at least one of these, and you'll probably get some consistent feedback. So the most common question that you will get, and for any of you who have done an interview, you probably have this question or a version of this question: tell me about yourself, right? And there are all sorts of ways to answer it. You can go on YouTube and see and pick the one that you enjoy the most, right? The one that actually resonates with you. I find that one of the simplest ones is what's called present, past, future. So talk about what you're doing now, talk about what you did before, and talk about how what you're going to do in the future, right? Hopefully get the role, right? It could also be your education, your experience, and your fit, right? So oftentimes that's with students, but sometimes with experienced professionals or young professionals, which is similar then to present, past, future, depending on where you are in your life stage, but really hones in on a little bit about you and making it relevant for the company and the role. Ideally, if you can make that role or your answer a little bit more personal, right? Actually say the name of the company. So if you're applying to Microsoft, say Microsoft. If you're applying to TD Bank, say TD Bank, right? Because oftentimes, if you've ever had a conversation with someone and you hear your name, your ears perk up a bit. You're like, oh, okay, they said my name. So Luki, whatever. So Luki, people tend to perk up when you hear their name. So instead of saying your company or your organization or whatever, say the name of the company. It adds that little personal touch. If you can, give a specific example. So if you're talking about how great you are at coding, or meeting deadlines, or detail-oriented, whatever, instead of just listing these things, give me an example. Because I don't start believing you until you actually show me how you've done it, right? So if you can give me an example, outline some of the ways that you've done it, and we'll use the share framework for the behavioral questions, which you can also use in this answer, and just give me an example. And what you want to do is practice, so it doesn't seem rehearsed. Practice so much, write it down and read it, write it down and change it, and do it again and again and again and again. So much so that it doesn't even seem like it's rehearsed, right? Because and practice now, right? You don't have to wait till you have an interview. Just practice today. and then practice tomorrow, practice tomorrow, and pick one thing to improve on each time, right? So all those things we talked about in the past, work on your eye contact and do it again and again and again. Okay, and after 10 days or 21 days, depending on how long you think it takes to set a habit, then you work on the next thing and then the next thing and the next thing. And the funny thing happens when you start practicing is you tend to get better and you improved. And then when you get better, you tend to be given offers, right? And or move on to the next stage or whatever, right? And then end it, right? So that's a little bit about me, or however, whatever the question was, so that people logically know that that's there, right? So I want to turn this over. And again, this is now a safe space, right? So we have a bunch of participants here and we might have time for a bunch of folks to do it, but I encourage you to take the opportunity and basically mock interview with me, right? So I've been on the other side as a hiring manager at one of the big four in their technology consulting practice. I've done this a bunch of times, and unfortunately, I don't get a lot of opportunity to give folks feedback, right? So I actually love the situation where I can see people learn and grow. So what I'd love to do is to, anybody want to mock interview with me, right? And if you want to either put in the chat or use the hands, raise your hand, or unmute yourself and signal somehow. I would love for someone to be interested enough to mock interview and brave enough, because it is a challenging thing amongst peers to do that. Do we have a volunteer?
Oh, I think we have Sana.
Sorry,
Sana?
yeah, sorry, I have issue maybe with my mic. Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yep.
Yeah.
Is it okay if we have Sana go first? She put her hand up. Is that okay, Mohammed?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. So Sana, are you?
Thank you. Okay. I'm ready.
Perfect. So what is the job that you'd want to interview for? Like pick a company, pick a role. Which one would you want to interview for?
So maybe I want to like interview for a full stack developer, and for company, I don't have anything in my mind right now.
Why don't you pick a company?
Okay. So have you heard about DocTalk? It's a startup company that I recently applied for it.
DocTalk?
Yes.
No, what do they do? Let me see if I can quickly find out.
Okay, so they are building this platform that is only for doctors. It's a social platform that can connect doctors together and they can talk to each other. But
Okay.
okay, let's say if I want to apply for Google, for example.
Okay. You don't have to make it easy on us, right? So part of it, it's easier. So the whole point of that is if you know the name of the company, like applying to DocTalk is going to be different than applying to Google.
Yes.
Right? So you can already see that that there's going to be a difference. So having an answer that's more relevant for Google versus more relevant for DocTalk, it'll depend. All right. So are you ready to go?
Sure.
Cool. Well, so are we going to do DocTalk then?
Okay.
Okay.
Let's do that.
Well, so thank you so much for coming in for the interview, Sana. Why don't you start off by telling us about yourself?
So as you may know from my resume, my background is actually mechanical engineering. And after working in the like mechanical engineering companies like Magna and PCC, I really find myself interested in more like coding stuff. So I decided to go and like apply for different boot camps. And I did this like 3 months boot camp for software engineering. It was general assembly. And I recently graduated and I find myself love coding and I'm really passionate about this job. And it is like my hobby and also my, I don't know, my education, I can say. And so right now I have a little background in like front end and back end, and I think that's it.
Okay. So first of all, can everyone give Sana a round of applause, and you can use the reaction or you can do it there. So thanks so much for volunteering to go first. And I would encourage folks to now give some feedback, right? So here's some constructive feedback, take some time. And the way that I ask to provide feedback is you have to say something nice, before you say something constructive, right? And the thing is, say something constructive, allow Sana to improve. She's gonna appreciate the feedback, but again, start with something nice, and get better. So I'd encourage you, everyone, to learn to give feedback, because when you can give feedback to others, you can also turn that and give it to yourself, right? Some people are more harsh on themselves, but sometimes it's good to learn to provide feedback. So can we have a volunteer to give feedback? And if you want to unmute yourself and give some feedback.
I think I talked less than 1 minute.
Yeah. So the quantitative stuff, I have 53 seconds
Okay.
and 78 for yours. So yeah, empirically it could be a little longer. Who else? Come on, this is a safe space. We're all going to be brave.
I think she presented herself very well in the beginning, but and she looked enthusiastic about being full stack developer, but she need to add more so that the enthusiasm will be genuine, more genuine, and she need to elaborate more about that.
Good. Good.
I agree.
Any other feedback?
I just wanted to say that I assume you can hear me.
Yeah,
I thought it was pretty clever how she reminded the interviewer of her work history. I thought it was possible that, I mean, some interviewers are, it depends on the company, I guess, but some people can be pretty busy and, or might forget, you know. Thought it was a good idea.
What could she have done to improve, David?
Oh, an improvement. I usually like to say two nice things, but I don't know enough about interviewing, I guess, to say. I mean, you mentioned like before, if you use the word like too much. I don't know, she used it maybe twice, which is, I don't think too much. I don't know, it's a subjective thing, isn't it?
It wasn't noticeable to me that she used that, but it could be. For some people, they might have picked up more.
Yeah, it was good though.
For me, I think it's great that you volunteered, first of all, and was brave enough to kind of break the ice with that. You had kind of a good smile and good energy with the answer. I think as David and Mohammed mentioned, a little bit more elaboration. So give me an example. So you went through General Assembly. Why did you pick it? Why did it become like a hobby? Why did it become an interest, a passion, or whatever? Give me an example of something you coded that you thought was like really impactful, really helpful, really useful. Sana, are you still there, or is your
I got
screen frozen?
disconnected. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you. No, I just
Okay.
want to make sure you were getting the feedback because it looked like it was frozen. Yeah, so an example would have been good. I think what David had mentioned about like reminding them about your past work history. One thing that I encourage you to do is connect it with the company. So if it was Doc Talk, right? Do you have any experience with healthcare, right? Being an engineer previously, is there any sort of connection with that realm, right? Because sometimes, especially the career switchers in the room, you might have some relevant past experience that's not necessarily related to coding, but could be really valuable for that company, right? So take a look at some of your transferable skills that might have been able to add some value. Maybe even reference a few like bullet points on the job description, right? Some of the things that they're looking for, say, this is how I've done it in the past, right? Some of the things that aren't on your resume, right? So part of the tell me about yourself is probably to reacquaint them with your resume, but part of it is also to say, and this is the stuff that wasn't in my resume that I'm able to elaborate on now that I have a couple more minutes in person in order to show you my value, right? So thinking about, well, what makes you different from another candidate? Because if you think about it, a lot of the folks on this call would have probably applied to Doc Talk too, right? As a full stack developer, right? So there's going to be a lot of competition, co-opetition, I'd like to call it, because you're all helping each other out. But what makes you better than someone else in your graduating class from General Assembly, right? What makes you more qualified for Doc Talk versus one of them? And if you can truly answer that, well, that makes you much more competitive, right? Otherwise, you're just like everybody else, right? So the more you can make it specific, the better. and more of a logical end to the answer where it's like, and that's a little about me. That's why I think I'd be a great fit for the role versus that's it. That's it's not usually a good ending. But yeah, I think it was a good start and a little bit more practice and elaborating more. Again, it was a little short, so maybe adding another 30 seconds to it with more content, more examples, you could probably get away with that.
Thank you very much for your feedback.
No, no problem. And Mohammed, we had, which Mohammed was it? Mohammed Al-Haq, Al-Halak?
Yeah.
Did you want to go as well?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. Are you able to start your video? Perfect. So
Yeah.
what
Can
would
you
be
hear
the,
me?
yeah, we can hear
Yes.
you. What would be the role and company that you'd be mock interviewing for?
I will be mocking. I will be. I'm interested in being a full stack JavaScript developer.
Okay. With which company?
Okay. Actually, the company I'm Spotify. I'm willing to work with Spotify.
Spotify? Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. So, well, thank you so much for coming in for the interview. Why don't you start off by telling us a bit about yourself?
Yeah. Actually, I'm having a vast experience in developing in the back end using Oracle applications, database, and all my development career, I was doing a lot of procedures and functions using Oracle database, SQL, BillSQL, procedural languages. But because I like now the trend of the open source JavaScript, because JavaScript never. I thought that that JavaScript and web development will die sometime in 2015, up to 2018, but currently JavaScript is dominating the market and it's now very mature than before, and it's very interesting and entertaining as well to develop application, a lot of application, web application, mobile application using JavaScript, so that I can extend my previous experience with new knowledge, new modern web development language like JavaScript, React, frameworks. So this is the interesting thing, and it's very interesting for me that in the past only whenever I was working as a Oracle SQL developer, it is the company itself only see the product, but whenever I use it for I use all these skill with JavaScripts, I can show not only the company I'm currently working in, I can show everybody, I can show the world that this is my application. I can be proud of myself, and it's just a very interesting role for me for the future. Thank you.
Okay. So I have 2 minutes and 3 seconds as the time. Well, my pseudo official timing of that. So it's probably about the right time length. You can add a little bit more, but who here is willing to provide feedback? So first of all, round of applause for Mohammed. Thank you for doing that. Anybody else willing to provide some feedback? Sana, as someone who went and got some feedback, it would be helpful if you can as well.
So I really like how you explain about your background, and also you said you know the job market, what is needed right now, and what are you interested. One thing that caught my eyes was that you were not looking to the camera. You were always looking up or on the side. That is the only thing that caught my eyes.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Any other feedback?
Hi, can you hear me?
I can.
Cool. I thought you did great, man. It's hard to raise your hand and do stuff like this. So bravo to you, like to just jump into a crowd like that. And from my own experience, I think it's cool just to be, as a junior person, excited to be on the call. So sometimes I would think smiling and looking at the camera gives you more power than all the words you use. It's just happy to be on the call is a cool thing. But again, bravo to you for raising your hand. I think you did a great job.
Definitely. So yeah, definitely echo that. Yeah, so great. There's a lot of positivity there. It was delivered with confidence, right? It sounded like you knew what you were talking about. What I would have liked to hear is a little bit more related to, well, you're going full stack, right? Was the role, but you talked a little bit about your back end stuff, right? You didn't really talk about full stack. So adding a little bit more of your relevance to the role, why you did that. Anything related to Spotify, right? Because you talked about your like a backend Oracle type experience and whatever, but you'd never mentioned Spotify or any kind of interest in there, like the music. Because especially with a company that has something like music, you better be someone who's musical, right? Well, you don't have to be, but it definitely adds a whole level if you are part of that industry, right? Because if you said that you hated music, well, you're probably not working at the right spot, right? Or if it's just something. So the more that you can make it more interesting for you to be there, then they will probably want to have you more. An example, right? So you talked about like in generalities where you thought that JavaScript would go away and die, but it now is kind of the leading thing. But you didn't really talk about kind of your application. You said that you want to show the world your application, but tell me about something that you coded, something that was cool and interesting, or some new learnings or whatever. You were talking more kind of generalities versus something specific to you and your value and your relation to the company, right? So if you could add a little bit more of that, then I think it would be a pretty strong answer. And then ending it again, and that's why I think I would be a great fit for the role, right? Versus thank you, right? You just stopped with thank you. So adding something like that would make it a really powerful answer. Cool. So far so good. So we had 2 examples on how to do things, and I wanted to move forward a little bit by getting folks to share amongst themselves. Oh,
Luki.
Oh, yes.
Josue wanted to also volunteer. Just one last one.
One last one, because I was actually going to allow people to go off into breakout rooms to do it on their own, or do we want to do?
It's up to Josue. What would you like to do, Josue? Do you want to do one-on-one with Luki or with other people?
It sounds like both is an option. So if Luki, if you're cool with it, I'll be as brief as I can be.
Yeah, sure. Okay, let's do it. What sort of company and role? Full stack something again, as everybody?
Well, actually, interestingly enough, I just got off a phone call with kind of an interview on a company that I was talking to. So it might be good to bounce off your ideas about how I handled it. The name of the company is Gatherly. They are a startup that they are building an application that's similar to Zoom, oddly enough, since we're on Zoom, that offers some interesting functionality in terms of the ability to kind of graphically see other participants and then be able to kind of create your own breakouts with them by manually selecting those individuals and having conversations with them. So super cool technology.
Cool.
Oh, that was the one.
As what would the role for?
It's the role is listed as a software engineer, so kind of broad in scope.
Okay.
But my experience is working with JavaScript. I feel will be the most kind of important part there.
Yeah. So thanks so much for coming in for the interview. Why don't you start off by telling me about yourself?
Great. Well, thank you. Well, my name is Josue, and I've been for the past 20 years working within Citigroup as a data scientist. I actually originally started off as a junior developer. I had completed a Java workshop, which introduced me to web technologies, and that's why I was hired. But due to my very strong interest in communications and working with databases, they saw an opportunity for me to be an analyst, and so I switched over. And for the last 20 years, I've been working as an analyst, still working very strongly with technology, providing feedback on testing, developing of applications, and working as kind of the go-between of technology and our management teams to develop these solutions. And so it's been a very big part of what I've done. But just recently, about a year ago, actually, I moved to Texas to get married. And so I took that as an opportunity to go back to where I first started as a junior developer and continue as a developer, starting again from scratch, in this, essentially. And so I've used the last year to really focus on working on the MERN stack, which, as you know, is Mongo, Express, React, and Node. And when I saw your particular product, I thought it'd be great, especially considering that I just came off as working as a manager who had to basically train 500 to 3,000 people on a regular basis using WebEx. And so seeing what you're doing, I find really fascinating, and it'd be great to really bring the two together, my new skills and my experience with what you're doing. So I think it'd be a really great fit and a really fun fit. And so I finished my boot camp another week from now. And so I'm excited to speak with you a little further, but I think this would be a lot of fun. And thank you very much for your time. That's why I think this would be a great fit.
Almost got it, right? So perfect. So first of all, thank you for doing that. I have as the official time clock 1:46 is mine, right? So empirically, it's about in the range. You have maybe a minute extra if you want to say a little bit more. But yeah, what do folks think?
That was awesome. That was really
Thanks.
cool. A lot about your experience, and you sounded really enthusiastic. That's what I really like. You sound like you really want to do this. Like, I really want to be around your energy. So I thought that was really good. And you spoke about your past experiences really well. You made those really clear. Yeah, and I thought it was really, really cool to hear about your experience. Awesome job.
Thanks.
And what could he do to improve? If you had to nitpick on something.
If I had to nitpick, I mean, there were a few filler words. I mean, you said and a few times, but that's a reach, honestly.
Yeah. Cool. Any other feedback?
I also think that was really good. I like how you spoke about your past experience and then brought it around to make sure you knew about the person who was interviewing you and speak about how you guys would make a great team. If I had to pick something, probably just slow down a bit. That's all.
Oh, cool. Thank you.
So yeah, again, thank you for being brave enough to be in front of the the peanut gallery, so to speak. But I thought it was great, lots of great energy there, and you went into your experience and explained kind of your progression. I think for me, if I were to kind of put myself in kind of a Gatherly hiring manager, so I'm hiring for a software engineer, right? I'm not hiring for a manager of business analysis or a business analyst or whatever. So I have to figure out, okay, do I take someone who is basically has lots of experience doing something else, has good energy, versus someone who has extensive experience, or maybe not as extensive in software engineering specifically, right? So I think a little bit more, I think you made the connection between yourself and Gatherly and the WebEx, a little bit more on your kind of development skills, your coding skills, like how your software engineering skills, like how have you retuned yourself? How have you made sure that you were up to date? You said a little bit about it, but a little bit more emphasis, because it sounds like there's a lot of great experience, a lot of transferable, and maybe even leveraging some of that other stuff and saying, and this is the value that I'll provide. Like my guess is that you're starting, like you're resetting, so you know you're going to start entry level type of thing and work from the ground back up, but use that and say, you know what, I've already been there, done that. I know what it takes, and I know I can do an amazing job in here, and I'll have a whole bunch of things that'll make me even better than the regular junior software engineer that'll come in. I'll be way better than them because of all this other experience that I've had. So use all of that other stuff. Some people are ageist, right? If you're in an entry-level job, they're going to think, well, why is this older guy applying to this entry-level job? Mm-hmm. Well, use that to your advantage, right? The fact that you're kind of a career switcher, right? You business analysis, that's business. That's not coding. That's not tech, right? But this is how it's going to help you, right? Because I'll understand why they're coding it, how to get through bugs, and how to figure that out. Use that to your advantage. And the ending part, I think you were almost getting in there. You almost reminded yourself about turning it into an ending, and that's why I think it would be a great fit for the role. Or those are a couple of things about me. Something like that would be great.
That's awesome. Thank you for the feedback. I really appreciate it. I'm sorry I'm late too. I came in late, so thank you so much. Thanks, Jennifer, for raising my hand.
No worries.
Perfect. So I actually don't know if we have, are we planning on stopping right at 2? Is that?
Oh, it's not a hard deadline. If you're okay
Okay.
to go over, we can go over a bit.
Well, because I have two aspects. Is one, going into, again, that breakout room for folks to practice. So in a room about 18, maybe grab like 4 people in a room and then they can practice with each other. That's one option. I do have a few more slides in terms of talking about behavioral type interviews, right? So maybe I'll quickly talk about that and then we'll use maybe the last 10 minutes to kind of go into the breakout. Is that okay?
Sounds good.
Folks are good with that? Okay. So we're gonna go off and do breakouts, but we're not gonna do that right now. So I'll get you things to practice, right? So obviously the top questions on Google, research your company, right? A lot of, especially the big companies, will have resume guides, right? They'll have the questions that are most commonly asked. You also want to turn the job posting into questions. So tell me about a time when you demonstrated, whatever the first bullet says. Tell me about a time when you demonstrated, whatever the second bullet point says. Tell me about a time when you demonstrated, third, fourth, fifth, because guess what they're going to ask you about the job, right? Can you do this stuff? This is what we're asking for. So turn those into into questions, and then do it on the negative. So tell me about a time when you demonstrated whatever the first bullet point says, and something went wrong, right? The second one, and something went wrong. The third one, and something went wrong. And then answer it again based on a particular strength that you have. So maybe you're detail-oriented, you're a people person, you're very analytical, whatever it is. Answer it again, but based on being analytical, detail-oriented, based on your last experience. So from your past job, 2 jobs ago, or your university experience or college experience or whatever it is. Your boot camp experience, whatever it is. And the point of answering all those questions the same, but in different ways, is that you get to be able to answer that question in different ways, right? Then your creativity. So when they ask you something that's unexpected, you've already answered it in 18 different ways. So you can come up with a 19th way pretty easily, right? So it's, at the end of the day, it's just forced practice, right? Oops, I have an extra slide in here. Other things, you want to make sure logistics, questions for the interviewer, and I encourage everyone to debrief, right? Where they basically reflect and improve. So saying, okay, now that I went through, so Josue, like the interview just went through, what could you have done better, right? What would you give yourself if you would give yourself a score out of 10, a 6 out of 10, a 9 out of 10? Even if you're 9 out of 10, how could you get yourself to a 10, right? What are things that you would do in order to improve, right? So reflect and learn. And one thing that I found people doing more and more of in an interview, especially the tell me about yourself question, is to pitch themselves, right? And all that is taking, like you're on Dragon's Den or Shark Tank or whatever, take a PowerPoint and they say, well, tell me about yourself. And they say, well, actually, if you don't mind, I have a quick presentation to go through a little bit about my background, right? And have 3 slides, 5 slides about yourself, present, past, future, or your education, experience, fit, whatever it is, and have that. And all it is just a couple of slides, but it makes you look so much more professional. It's one of those things that make you stand out, because who does that sort of stuff, right? Who actually does that? Very few people, and it's one thing that I find more and more people are doing. And sometimes it could be just a simple slide with 1 word or 3 words or a couple of pictures that show you about yourself, right? And oftentimes focusing on that UVP, that unique value proposition. Why you versus the other 7 people that are waiting in line for the interview, right? And if you can clearly explain that, then they're bound to pick you, right? So the other set of questions that are pretty common are the behavioral ones, right? They're the questions about, tell me about a time when, give me an example when you've demonstrated leadership, when you had to deal with a difficult client or something like that. So those are kind of the telltale signs. And the most common framework is the STAR framework, but I prefer the SHARE framework, which is basically the same thing, except it adds an E at the end. But I guess they didn't want to call it STARE, so they called it SHARE. So the S is situation. Give me some background. What were you doing? What was your role? Who was in the area? Were you a lead? Were you part of the engineering team? Was it a big project, a small project? Whatever it is. The H is the hindrance, the problem. So what was happening, right? Tight deadlines, like a technical glitch that brought production down, code that was not working, or an integration that was not possible, whatever it is. And then the A is the action. What did you do, right? And you can talk about the project, but really focusing on what did you do, right? So we had to debug, we stayed all night, we did this. And the R is the result. So what happened? Did you fix it? Did it work? Was the client happy, right? You want to know stuff like that. And then the E is the most important part, and goes back to the why does that benefit the company in the role? So E is evaluate. Why did what you just say add value to me, to the company as a future employee, a potential future employee, someone that's working for us? Why would that add value to you, right? So if you can do that in as little as 5 sentences, then you can answer pretty much any of those questions, right? And if you want to know if you're complete, then think about, did I give a background? Did I talk about the problem? Did I talk about what I did against the problem? Did I talk about what happened? And did I talk about what I learned and why it would be a benefit there? And there are actually some companies, a lot of the bigger companies that are trained, like the HR people are actually looking for S. Okay, did they give me the background? H, or tasks, is where star comes in, the action and the result, right? And they're actually looking for that, right? And if you're not answering it, then you haven't gone through the proper interview coaching and stuff like that. So practice doing that. And yeah, so those are some of the questions that are often there. And I guess if folks are okay, then I'll send folks into breakout rooms for maybe 5, well, I don't know, can we do 5-10 minutes? if maybe for 10 minutes. What I'd probably do, there's 17 people online, -3, so 14. So do rooms of probably 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I usually say is, should we do, yeah, you want to ask again, what is the company that you're interviewing for? So the company in the role, it's probably going to be some sort of developer or software engineer or whatever, but pick one of the questions. So the question here is, tell me about a time when you had to deal with a difficult person, is kind of one of the most common questions that you can practice. And I'll take it and put it into the chat. Hopefully I can do this.
Luki,
Are we okay to do that?
Do you want 3 to 4 people in a room, or do you want 2 to 3 people in a room?
2 to 3, probably it'll happen better. Well, 3 to 4 is actually okay, but no more than 4.
Okay, no worries.
Do the numbers work out so that it's
yeah.
okay?
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Okay.
And where is my chat? So you should be able to get the chat here.
Perfect. Let me know when I should click the button and I'll create the rooms.
Okay, so basically what I want everybody to do is there'll be a room of 3 or 4 of you, right? The person who is alphabetically last from a first name perspective, they're first in answering. The next person alphabetically last is going to be the person asking the question. Anybody else, one person's going to be a timer, right? And then the other people are going to be providing feedback. So whoever is the person asking will ask, what is the company? The one who's alphabetically last will be answering, right? And then we'll pause it there. Everybody will give feedback. And then if there's time, we'll rotate, right? So just kind of continue rotating. Does that make sense for everybody? And this is where everybody's hopefully going to turn on their cameras and start participating so that everybody can have the full HD experience and all that sort of stuff. And hopefully you're in a group where folks are able to kind of participate. And yeah, everybody understand the instructions? So the question is, tell me about a time when you had to deal with a difficult person.
Okay.
So, and it's within the chat if you need some reference, okay? Everybody good with that?
Okay, great.
All right, so I think Jennifer will, for those who haven't used breakout functionality, you'll get a little prompt that says, you'll be invited to join room whatever. So click join, and then you'll be taken to that. It's basically a mini Zoom where you're in there with only 3 or 4 people.
Mm-hmm.
If you really need help, there's a ask for help button up there. Or you can go exit back to the main room if you really need to, right? Mm-hmm. But hopefully everything goes according to plan. Okay, everybody good? Awesome.